This episode of Sideline Warning is brought to you by Roosport, makers of the original magnetic running pouch. Whether you're biking, running, hiking, or even traveling, the Roosport clips to your waistband with magnets for an easy, convenient way to carry what you need without the bulk of belts or bags. Visit theroosport.com and use the code SIDELINE30, all lowercase, for 30% off their entire product line. Again, that's theroosport.com, promo code SIDELINE30. And now on with the show.
The philosopher Pierre Desjardins once said, "Everything that rises must converge." I'm Ben Foster, and this is the Sideline Report. Welcome into the Sideline Report, everyone. I'm Ben Foster. Dave and Adam are not on the show. This is just the Sideline Report, a quick update where I want to take a few minutes to talk about one very specific topic. You heard from Dave and Adam already this week on the big show, and today I want to talk very specifically about Alabama versus Baylor. Now, I led off with that quote by the French philosopher. We don't normally drop French philosophers into the show or anything like that, but that quote came to mind because that seems to be what's happening with Baylor and Alabama. Both teams have had some questionable wins and questionable losses early in the season, but as of late, both teams are doing well. They're getting quality wins against ranked opponents, and they're both on very similar tracks. If you take a look at KenPom right now, at the time I'm recording, Baylor is number 45 in the KenPom rankings. Where is Alabama? They're number 47. Yesterday they were right together at 45 and 46. You know, these numbers fluctuate from time to time. Guess who's in between Baylor and Alabama? Our old friend UCF. But that's neither here nor there. The point is that if Baylor's number 45 and Alabama's number 47 in the KenPom ratings, both teams are almost statistically the same when it comes to their overall court performance. Now, Baylor is not as good of an offensive team as Alabama, according to these statistics, but Baylor is also a much better defensive team than Alabama, according to these statistics. So things balance out. Alabama may not be playing their best defense. Baylor might be a little bit more better offensive team, so you might see some advantages there. But then Alabama's being a much more efficient team on offense for this season, and that's helping Alabama out. So that will be a challenge for Baylor's defense. So when you look at these kind of things, these teams are statistically even. They just have different strengths. So one of the things that I think it's good to look at with KenPom is just where the game's projected to fall. By most measures, this would look like a quadrant 1 game because Baylor's a pretty good team and Alabama's on the road. So this is a good Q1 opportunity for Alabama by most measures. And Baylor right now in the KenPom ratings is projected to win this game by 4 points. They're projected to win 72-68. And KenPom gives Alabama a 36% chance of winning. So that means, essentially if Alabama played Baylor 3 times, they'd probably win one of those 3 games. So let's hope the 1 in 3 chance surfaces on Saturday, and that's when Alabama gets the win. 4 points in a projection is not too much. Things could go either way. Mississippi, Ole Miss in their game against Alabama was favored, or Alabama was favored. It was almost statistically even, and we saw what happened there. Alabama scored and won by 21 points. So you never know what's going to show up. The other thing I want to point out is Alabama over the last 3 games has been playing their best defensive basketball. So when we say Alabama statistically doesn't look as good on defense, that's not true if you're just looking at where the team's been over the last few games. So these teams are very evenly matched statistically. They're both on similar paths where they're playing their best basketball right now, and they're both peaking at the same time. Baylor has recently come off of a victory over number 8 Texas Tech. So that's a big quality win for Baylor. But you also say, well, wait, Bama's beaten ranked opponents. They beat Ole Miss. They almost beat Tennessee. Both of these teams appear to be able to hang with anybody in the country. Baylor's been able to play Kansas, and by most measures, Kansas is one of the best teams. They lost by just 5 points to Kansas. So when it comes to playing ranked teams, playing up to high competition, both teams have been very competitive in the last few weeks. Speaking of looking at Baylor's schedule, when you look at Baylor's schedule, you notice one thing that's very significant, there's a lot of familiar names. And let's go to it. Southern University, Ole Miss, Wichita State, Arizona, Stephen F. Austin. That's 5 schools that Baylor has played this season that Alabama has also played. So when you look at that, you say, wow, there's a lot of tape where you can compare what the teams have done. And so, again, this is just another point I want to make in the narrative of these teams converging. There's a lot of similarities because they've had a lot of similar opponents. Now, granted, the outcomes haven't been all the same. Baylor beat Southern 80-53. That's a little bit more significant than what Alabama did to beat Southern early in the season. Both teams played Southern in November. Alabama, when they played Southern, had a little bit of a closer outcome. So Baylor, taking a look at them playing Ole Miss, they lost to Ole Miss, but they were playing in Florida in a tournament. They were in Niceville, Florida, near Destin, and they lost to Ole Miss in November, 70-78. So at that point, Ole Miss was playing good basketball. That's one reason why Mississippi's ranked now is because of how they did against Baylor earlier in the season. That was a good win in a tournament that helped boost Ole Miss's resume. Now we know what Alabama did to Ole Miss. So the thing to keep in mind here is this stuff is never 1-to-1. The transitive property doesn't really work. So if Bama beats Ole Miss by 21 and Ole Miss beats Baylor by 8, that should mean Bama wins by 29, right? No, that's not how math works, because it's you never know what team is going to show up on what day, and also venues make a difference. That's what I've been trying to teach Dave. So that's the Ole Miss game. Wichita State. They played that at Wichita State. Baylor lost to Wichita State in Wichita, and they lost 71-63. Now that, of course, is very different than Bama's win against Wichita State in a tournament. Then we talk about another common opponent, Arizona. Both teams have beaten Arizona. Baylor beat Arizona 58-49, and they did that in Arizona. That's a little bit different than playing Arizona in Tuscaloosa, but there you go. Just another example of how Baylor has handled a common opponent. Now, a lot of people talked about Bama traveling to Nacogdoches, Texas to take on Stephen F. Austin, how that was just sort of a strange, random road game right there at the end of 2018. Well, Baylor hosted Stephen F. Austin, and what happened? They lost to Stephen F. Austin 59-58. A 1-point loss on your home court to a mid-major like Stephen F. Austin. Now, that team may go on to win their conference and make it into the tournament, but still losing at home in a game like that in December is not the best thing. So both teams played Stephen F. Austin in late December. They played Arizona in the middle of December. They're catching similar teams at similar times. It's very eerie how similar the schedules are. So I've told you the teams converge statistically. They're ranked similarly. They have very similar schedules and a ton of common opponents. But then also what's converging for this game is just where the teams stand in terms of bracketology. And I know what you're thinking. You go, look, Ben, it's January still. It's way too early to be thinking about the brackets. And I say it's never too early to be thinking about the brackets because you want to know where other people are assessing your team. So let's take a look at a few of those. In ESPN's bracketology, Joe Lunardi's projection, which he's updating all the time, right now he has Alabama as one of the last 4 in. He has Baylor as one of the first 4 out. So imagine, if Alabama wins this game, that keeps making their case towards being in the tournament. If Baylor wins this game, then the teams probably flip-flop. Baylor becomes one of the last 4 in, and Alabama's one of the first 4 out. So there's ramifications in this game to affect each team's standing as to whether or not they get into the tournament. Now, this one game isn't make or break. It doesn't determine everything, but it certainly is something that will look good on the resume. A good win here on the road really helps Alabama out. All right, let's take a look at CBS's bracketology. Jerry Palm is there doing those projections. When you look at the first 4 out, Baylor and Alabama are both in the first 4 out. Jerry Palm at CBS sees these teams as almost the same. They both have 12-6 records. These teams are very similar. Another bracket I like to look at is the teamrankings.com bracketology. In there, they've got Baylor as a 9 seed, and they've got Alabama projected as an 11 seed. So they're a little bit more generous. They've got a lot of teams that would normally be on the bubble. They go ahead and start putting them in the tournament. And they're very, very strong on like letting the computers do the stats there for them. So in that case, they're projecting Baylor to go ahead and be in and have a little bit better seeding. That's probably an advantage of being in the Big 12 versus the SEC. I think both conferences are pretty similar in talent. This weekend's SEC Big 12 Challenge will help prove some of that. But right now, in most perceptions, Big 12 is slightly a better basketball conference than the SEC. Let's look at another bracketology. When we go to SB Nation, Chris Daubertine's projections at blogging the bracket. This projection has Alabama at the first 4 out, and then Baylor is in the next 4 out. So Alabama would be just barely missing in these projections, and Baylor is a little bit further back. So again, it's just an opportunity for these teams in this game to make a strong case for their resume to be in rather than out. And for the loser of this game, there's just a little bit more of an anchor to say out. And for the winner, there's a little bit more of an anchor to say, hey, we should be in. Then another one I like to look at is Bracketville. In this case, they have Baylor as one of the last 4 byes, and they have Alabama as one of the last 4 in. So Baylor would get a standard bye, and Alabama would be in one of the play-in games. So again, it's just a similar situation where these teams are on the similar path. So when you look at all of this, you've got all of these things to consider. Statistically, the teams are similar in where they rank nationally. In terms of the brackets, they're similar. And in terms of the schedule, they're similar. This is going to be a very interesting game, and I can't wait to see it. In fact, I'm so excited for it, I'm traveling to Texas to be able to be there at the game and see what Alabama does. I think if Alabama is able to play the defense that they've been playing in the last few games, that's going to be very disruptive for Baylor. Then it's just a matter of keeping somebody like John Petty hot or having somebody else like Tevin Mack step up. Bama's been very good the last few games to limit turnovers and be aggressive in getting turnovers. I think that could play a big role in this too. But one of the most important things to look at in this game is depth and rotations. Alabama, loves to play 10 guys. And part of that's because Avery Johnson wants to find the hot hand. Part of it is there's so many guys that are similar and have different traits. I think Alabama is going to play a lot of guys and keep them fresh. It's just a matter of whether or not we get the best out of those guys. Baylor is not as deep of a team. They're going to have to rely a lot on 6 or 7 guys rather than 10 guys. They've had a few injuries affect players this year. One of their key players has been lost for the season, and Baylor still played good basketball in spite of that. But it's a very different situation when you have fewer guys that are available to contribute at a high level, and that's going to be a challenge for Baylor. Bama benefited greatly. Bama was going to win against Ole Miss no matter what by the second half, but at the point they had a starter foul out, that really affected the game. If Baylor gets in foul trouble early, which would be a little unexpected at home, but you never know, if Baylor gets in foul trouble early, there's going to be a strong advantage for Alabama, and I think that's going to be part of it. Do fouls create a war of attrition for Baylor? If that's the case, those kind of things will factor in for Alabama winning this game. So there we go. That's my quick breakdown. I just wanted to point out just how similar things are for Baylor and Alabama and how much is at stake. Granted, when the committee looks at wins and losses, Bama, if they lose this game, gets a little bit of a benefit of the doubt. They're playing a Big 12 team on the road. That they get the benefit of the doubt. But if they get this win, that's a really strong quality win. So there's way more upside in winning than there is downside in losing. Granted, you never want to lose. So Bama, let's go get it. Let's win this game. Let's go get a road kill. I'm Ben Foster, and this has been the Sideline Report.